So the Russians, in the opposition, as I was saying, between Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, Dostoevsky is the mystic, the man of the early phase, the springtime phase of civilization. And this is all part of the Russian pseudomorphosis. He claims that Bolshevism is merely, it is to the Russians more or less what the Maccabean revolt was within the classical civilization. It's a rebellion, even though it uses Western culture forms, since Marxism is a Western idea. It basically, it's a boundary act that demarcates Russian civilization from the rest of the West. So it's using our own culture forms to try to exterminate its own, to try to break free of the West. But he says that it's not authentic, and Bolshevism then its days are numbered, and eventually Spengler says it will crumble and disintegrate. I think he was very prophetic in that sense, as in so many of his other ideas, that it would crumble and disintegrate, and he says it should eventually then give rise to a new kind of Tsarism at some point. I'm not sure Russia's anywhere near that point yet, but it should give rise to a new kind of Tsarism. It should revert back to its deep mysticism. I think the sequel to Dostoevsky, in this sense, after the pseudomorphosis of Bolshevism and Stalinism, is actually the great Russian film director Andrei Tarkovsky, who gets going in the 1970s with great movies like Solaris, which clearly are fundamentally mystical and continue in the tradition of Dostoevsky and represent a resumption of that authentically Russian, deep, pious, inward, mystical mentality that we see in the springtime forms of all the great civilizations. So take a look at the films of Tarkovsky if you want a sense of, he only made something like 7 of them, but they're all great, every single one of them, especially Solaris, which is my favorite. Whatever you do, don't watch the George Clooney version of Solaris. It's a Western Hollywood parody of Tarkovsky's very deep, very brilliant film that is based on the Stanislaw Lem novel, although it's fundamentally different from that novel. The Lem novel is not a mystical novel. It's not a deep religious novel at all. Tarkovsky turns it into that, consistent with the inwardness of the Dostoevskian worldview that Spengler says is truly characteristic of the nature of Russia, where it is at today. So Russia is awakening, and he says that though it bears with industrialization, the railroads, the machines, and so forth, it's really fundamentally antipathetic toward them. Eventually the machine should either slide off or undergo some sort of transformation in an unpredictable way in Russia. It's not something that's authentically them, that belongs with them, that's something that they want. It will fall away, and its religious awakening will continue, and it will end up transforming Christianity most likely in a new way, beyond the traditional Orthodox version of it that it inherited from the Byzantine civilization, which is really a Magian it comes in origin from the Magian. The Orthodox is for Spengler, the Byzantine civilization was not its own civilization as it was for Toynbee or Borkenau, but an offshoot or an extension or a side annex of the Magian civilization. So the Russians will inherit that and transform it. So the Russians are just getting started, and they represent the wave of the future for Spengler, and he says that their prime symbol, all these civilizations, remember, have a prime symbol, the body for the Greeks, infinite space for the Faustians, the cavern for the Magians. For the Russians, the idea is the boundless horizontal flat plane that extends to the horizon forever. It's not infinite space because it denies the vertical tendency. The Russian word for heaven, nebo, has the n negative in it. He says that the idea of a Russian being an astronomer is an absurdity. For the Russian, it's the boundless, endless plane and the subsumption and submersion of the I, the ish, the individual ego, into the fraternal brotherhood. The Russian communal mentality is a fraternal one, and the sins that are committed, for example, by Raskolnikov in Crime and Punishment are a sin against the Russian brotherhood, not a sin in the sense in which we Europeans would understand it as fundamentally part of the ish, the history of the I, the ego, but a sin against the rest of society. And so Russian society is fundamentally communal, and the prime symbol is this flat, endless plane in which the vertical tendencies are denied. He says if you look at the cupolas, the onion-shaped cupolas in the Russian churches, they hover. They don't go straight up like the Gothic spires. They flatten out and sort of round off and hover and deny the vertical tendency. So that's the essay on Prussianism and socialism in which he characterizes the basic differences of the temperaments of the nation states. So we can see his application of the morphological cultural method to these Western European nation states. It's a wonderful essay. I highly recommend. I'm glad I decided to reread that. I hadn't read it since I haven't actually read any of this stuff since I was an undergrad. Spengler was something I discovered as an undergrad. I think I was a sophomore in college and haven't read anything whatsoever. And discovering him was like discovering a hidden treasure in which suddenly everything that had been wallpaper, Rembrandt, Beethoven, all this stuff that you hear as peripheral subliminal stuff to the awareness of a 20-year-old suddenly mattered, suddenly fit into place, and I suddenly saw how all this stuff fits together. So Spengler works very well to introduce culture to an undergrad student, and I highly recommend him, especially for undergrads whose mind has not yet been poisoned by specialism and captured by professors who resent this kind of generalist way of doing things and can find nothing but critical things to say about Spengler and have no appreciation for this kind of grand visionary totality, this kind of encyclopedic visionary that's now lost. Nobody does this thing anymore. Spengler was one of the last Western geniuses to have an encyclopedic mind. But I think it's absolutely essential to encounter this kind of mind and to wrestle with it and to find your own criticisms of Spengler. Find out what it is about it that you don't like. And there's some things I don't like that I want to get into here in this first chapter of Volume 2, as well as some great things. I think this first chapter of Volume 2 is Spengler at his best and at his worst. It's called Origin and Landscape, Letter A, the Cosmic and the Microcosm. And for some odd reason, the way the chapters are organized in Volume 2 is in terms of triads, whereas they had been dyads in Volume 1, just Part 1, Part 2, Part 1, Part 2. Now they're ABC, ABC, ABC for some strange reason that I haven't yet figured out. So this is the first of 3 chapters on origin and landscape, and this one is very fascinating, the cosmic and the microcosm. It's actually one of my favorites, and it represents a transformation of Nietzsche's Apollonian and Dionysian tendencies, I think filtered through the lens of Bergson's creative evolution. Spengler just read Bergson after finishing the first volume, and I think you can see the influence of creative evolution on this chapter. What he does then is he starts off by saying, regard the flowers at eventide, as the sun is setting and the flowers start closing up. They start shutting down. They're part of something. They're part of a larger organism, something cosmic that the little gnat buzzing around in the late afternoon orange sunlight isn't. The gnat buzzing around in the late afternoon sunlight has a sense of freedom, a relative sense of freedom. It's a microcosm over and against the macrocosm. The plant is bound to this macrocosm. It does not have its own will. Its will is part of the cosmos. But the gnat, the animal, even as the animal as small as a bacteria, an infusoria, he says, in a bit of water, represents a microcosm unto itself with a relative degree of freedom in opposition to the great macrocosm to which it is subordinated. So he's going to move into this, he's going to transform his earlier destiny versus causality, world as history, world as nature, into this idea now of the cosmic versus the microcosmic. Destiny is the cosmic, the individual organism, especially of the animal type, is the microcosm, the microcosmic. And he's going to say then that there are these 2 aspects to being. And he's going to use the word Dasein here before Heidegger uses it. This is in 1922, and Heidegger read him. It's possible that Heidegger got Dasein from Spengler, or maybe not. It may just be so common in German philosophy that they're both using it separately. But Spengler uses it in a different way from Heidegger. In this chapter, what he'll say then is that he wants to distinguish between periodicity and polarity, and he says that periodicity is the cosmic side of life. Everything that's cosmic, and the plant is cosmic, it is the essence of a cosmic thing, bears the stamp of pulse, beat, rhythm, cosmic cyclicity, the planets astrologically whirling around the cosmos. This is the cosmic side of life, and it's characterized by cyclicity and periodicity. And this is linked to, obviously, you can see how it's linked to the destiny idea. Whereas the world of the animal is a world based on tensions, and hence polarities between a subject and an object, an I and a thou, a waking consciousness that emerges, that has a definite birth, and every morning has another birth that awakens the consciousness into a world of light that awakens around it 3-dimensionally, and to which it must suffer the fate of being a lone single organism. And he says then that this cosmic aspect Every time we have a crowd phenomenon in the human world, we look at flocks of birds moving as one, shoals of fish moving as one, the crying child clinging to its mother's breast, the man struggling, the mystic struggling to force his way back into union with his God through the unio mystica. These are all manifestations of the microcosm trying to dissolve the boundaries and membranes that separate his or its consciousness from the macrocosm and re-achieve this fundamental cosmic Dionysian unity with the macrocosm. And so the microcosmic, the animal is always trying to, in the herd phenomena, and in human culture, this becomes especially true of the use of hallucinogenic substances amongst the planting cultures of the agricultural complexes to achieve union back with the cosmic by dissolving the boundaries and membranes that separate the individual consciousness as a bubble and reunite it back with the globe, using Peter Sloterdijk's terminology, the globe of the macrocosm, is something that is consistent with human culture throughout. So periodicity versus polarity. And then he's going to say then that he's going to term these Wachsein on the one hand versus Dasein on the other. So he's going to say that Dasein, which in German is being there being, Dasein actually means this cosmic sense of belongingness, this pulse, beat, rhythm, this macrocosmic cycle. That's the Dasein aspect, our being nature. He says that actually in the physical body, we have two organs that belong to the Dasein side of life. They are the sex organs and the circulation of the blood. And the circulation of the blood, Spengler says, invented the sex organs for itself. The sex organs are the plant-like element that has been retained by the animal. So the plant is just what it is. It's a plant, whereas the animal is plant plus something else. And the sex organs carry on this plant-like aspect into the animal, and the animal has something else, namely a waking consciousness, Wachsein. So Wachsein is waking consciousness. In opposition to Dasein, it's the realm of what it sounds like, being alive and awake and aware, and there are two organs that the human has on the Wachsein side, which are the senses, the five senses, and the nervous system. He says that an individual asleep has reverted back to a plant-like state. The sleeping individual is now a plant, once again. This can be further illuminated actually with Rudolf Steiner. It's very consistent with him when he says that Steiner's distinction between the etheric body and the astral body is basically the same thing. We have the physical body, which is obvious. The etheric body is the plant-like element within us that simply runs the body in a vegetal way. And Steiner says that when you're asleep, the etheric body now is simply there, organizing the physical body, repairing the damages that the various poisons have done on a daily basis to it. But the astral body has left. So the astral body is that which differentiates animal life as a waking organism with a Wachsein around it from the cosmic. The astral body, he says, when you're asleep and you're dreaming, the only difference between in death, the etheric body has withdrawn. So all that's left there in a dead body for Steiner is the mineral body, the physical body, that which we have in common with the mineral world. In sleep, the etheric body's there, but the astral body's gone, and all the higher brain functions are gone. It's gone off into the dream world, which Steiner says is the astral plane. So these Germans are all very consistent. Their mysticism, which I find wonderful, and I'm very addicted to it, in which the French, too often for me, make the mistake of just junking it all and getting rid of it. I find this stuff to be absolutely fantastic. So that's Steiner and Spengler, and how Steiner is compatible with Spengler. And again, Spengler is transforming Nietzsche's Apollo and Dionysus. Dionysus is the cosmic rhythm, and Apollo is the microcosmic tension. Joseph Campbell will later come along. Spengler was his favorite author, and he will inherit this and apply Spengler's differentiation here between Wachsein and Dasein to the world of historical culture forms for primitive man. What Spengler fails to differentiate is the different phases of primitive man, what we would now call aboriginal civilization. He sort of says everything before the Bronze Age, everything before the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians is simply the world of primitive man. But Campbell came along, and having read another individual named Leo Frobenius, who actually Spengler will begin working in this volume. He read Leo Frobenius. He's a great German anthropologist, not a very PC one nowadays, who went all around Africa collecting all these culture forms. And it was Leo Frobenius who figured out that there were two fundamental archaic distinctions between the hunters and the planters, the agricultural peoples of the Neolithic, who invented the village world based on the model of the plant, versus the earlier and much older world going back into the upper Paleolithic of the hunters, who lived based on the intuition of the animal forms. And for Joseph Campbell, this became the way of the animal powers, which is governed by shamanism, which is a religion based on the tensions between the individual, the hunter, and the animal. And there's always a sort of violent encounter.